I'm not waking up in the middle of the night. I turn my phone off every day at 5 p.m. I turn my clock off every night. I mean, I still get up at 4:30 in the morning, but I don't have to. I could sleep until noon if I wanted to, right? That's what we built. We built that.
Welcome to the Real Estate Investment School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Today, our guest is Mike and Caroline Neubauer. Mike was a firefighter to financial freedom in 5 years through real estate. Started with short-term rentals, moved into long-term rentals, midterm rentals, developments, and syndications. Caroline was a stay-at-home mom, and she became one of the top realtors in less than 3 years on where she's at. $40 million in transactions just since 2021. Needless to say, they are a power couple, and we're excited to have them on the podcast today. So welcome, Mike and Caroline. Good to have you guys here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Joe.
Man, that's pretty awesome to see, both of your guys' success on two different sides and spectrums of the real estate game, but I'm sure those feed into each other much. Maybe we can dive into that. How is having someone on both sides of it affected both of your success on each side?
Yeah, I think, we started off like most people, kind of dipping our feet into real estate. And then once we started seeing the upsides to it, we just dove in head first, right? And that took us out of the W-2 job within, like you said, 5 years. And once we got out of that W-2 through the investing side, we realized real quickly that it would be really beneficial to have one of us on the agent side of things. And so Caroline is naturally much better with people than I am and was the logical choice. So yeah, that having that both sides, I think has been really beneficial for us because we can look at deals in different ways. And we can also, like Caroline can help, investor savvy clients a lot better than someone, who has never done a deal.
Yeah.
That's
and
cool. So yeah, go on.
I was going to say, we've learned a lot too, because of our network, I've gotten to work with a lot of investors who are much more along than us, but just not familiar with Maui. And so we've gotten to see how different deals are structured and just a lot more creative opportunities for us when we make our offers.
Yeah, I love that. So it's cool. So you started with the investing, Mike. You started doing this, and then that was a big impetus for you, Caroline, to become an agent, was just so you could be on the other side of it all.
Yeah, and also just so that we, like, tax benefit wise, it's a lot easier to get that status with an active real estate license. So it's a little strategic in that way too.
Definitely.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And then, like you said, as you're in it and you're doing, I always say like action leads to opportunity, and you're doing all these different things, and you just learn so much. And like you were saying, you see all these different strategies, and if you're only doing one thing, you only get exposed to so much. So the more you're doing, you guys can, like, it's kind of like 1 + 1 is 3 with you guys.
I like it.
That's cool. Well, that's great. So yeah, let's hear a little backstory. So you guys are on Maui, cheap real estate, just super approachable, no big deal. Not the place most people think of starting their real estate empire, but how did you come across it all? Where did it start?
Yeah, I think if we went back to the beginning, it was while I was in the fire department. We weren't really thinking about real estate or anything like that. I just happened to have a senior firefighter who was dabbling in it, and he had some short-term rentals, but he kind of just treated it like a side gig. And he would tell me what's going on with it and whatnot. And I'd kind of look over his shoulder and see what he was doing. And I realized like the numbers that he was producing were just incredible. I mean, way, way more than what we were seeing in our paychecks as firefighters. So I kind of asked him like, well, why aren't we going bigger, better, further on this thing? Right. And he's like, it just wasn't for him at that point. He liked the stability of being a firefighter. And, so I just basically asked if I could pick his brain, and sitting in the back of a fire truck and living together for 24 hours a day is like, I had a lot of time for that. So, I was able to kind of learn from him and dive in and start, networking and listening to podcasts and reading books and all that fun stuff, all while like getting this knowledge and consuming all of this 24/7, it seemed like. And so when we were ready to buy our first short-term rental, we knew exactly what to look for because we had all the data from him. So we knew what was going to provide the best returns. And this for us was our path out of the golden handcuffs, which, Maui firefighter is a pretty good job, but like financial
It's like
freedom
it's
is a
hard
whole
to
lot
get
better.
into. It's high desired. Well, it's like very competitive. It's like you're
Yeah,
crazy to walk away from it.
Yeah.
But
totally.
And then jumping back to your question about why Maui, when it is a very expensive market, especially as an entry level, it was our backyard. So
yeah.
it made sense to be able to see it, breathe it, touch it within, a 20-minute radius.
Well, and something that I love about it is you every market has its strengths and weaknesses, right? And there's obviously an inherent strength if it's your backyard because you know it more intimately, it's more approachable, you have contacts, so it's not. And so
Yep.
you guys found well what's going to be the best way to approach real estate in our backyard? And obviously, short-term rentals probably jumped out pretty simply, not knowing how simply, but as well, people want to go to Maui, right? And so,
Yeah.
if you're in some other state, it might be like, oh, well, long-term rentals are the go-to right here. Other places like midterm, and you guys have dabbled in all of it.
Mhm.
But that it makes sense that you found what's going to be the strongest approach in the area where I already live. That's such a good, safe way to ease in to real estate. Since then, have you expanded into other states when you dabbled in the mid and long term, or was those all in Maui as well?
No, we have actually. We started diversifying. So like our strategy was always from the beginning was like, how do we get to passive? Right.
Right.
And so, for us, it was, look, we're going to buy short-term rentals because we know that active investing is going to lead to the highest upside, the highest returns, right? But then as we started making those returns, we were never pulling any money out of the business. So we were always reinvesting that into more short-term rentals or whatnot. But the goal was always to get that from that active side of the spectrum to the passive. And so when I would say it was probably in about, when was it, 2020 that we bought Marina? Yeah, it was 2020. We bought our first out of state property.
Mm.
And that was, a single family home that we ended up midterm renting. And, just slowly getting more and more passive as we went. And so today, everything that we have is pretty passive. Even our short-term rentals, we've gotten to the point where we've put them into property management.
Really? So you don't manage your own short-term rentals anymore?
Mm-mm.
Wow. So yeah, that's something interesting point out. You're like short-term rentals is not passive real estate. I mean, even long-term's not passive, but short-term's really
Yeah,
not passive.
every couple of days.
Yeah.
And it's funny because everybody comes to me wanting, they're like, I want to learn real estate. I want to have passive income. And I just want to do like these cool short-term Airbnbs. I'm like, yeah, it's not quite what you think,
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you actually have been able to outsource the short-term rental after you kind of built your long-term portfolio. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's a different style of approach, right? Like we gave up a lot of cash flow to do that.
Sure.
And
Not cheap.
it's not cheap. So property management, I mean, you're looking at for short-term rentals anywhere from 20 to 25% on average in the markets that we invest in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of cash flow right there.
Yeah.
But we've decided that our time is more valuable than that. So for us, that was our way of getting to a better success point, I suppose.
Yeah, it was a transition stage that we always wanted to happen. So there's no great time to close a faucet that's producing, but also it was the time that we could make that move and we had reached the goals that we wanted to. So now it was next level. And that was the way we could still do it and still keep a couple of them.
I think it's so cool that you guys are so aligned on your goal, that you're willing to sacrifice for it, because so many people are like, they're trying to get out of the 9 to 5, so they get into real estate, but then they lose track of that goal of actual having freedom, time freedom, and passive income, like, because it starts to eat up their life and they start making good money with real estate. It's like, wait, the goal wasn't to stop firefighting so I can manage Airbnbs.
Right.
Correct.
The goal was freedom, and you have to sacrifice each step.
Mhm.
And it's cool that you guys were willing to make that sacrifice. I always say freedom's expensive,
It
and
is.
that's just, to go buy all the properties and put all your savings into properties is expensive. It's expensive to hire property managers. But if you don't, guess what? You're owning a job, not being free. So it's just one step deeper, which is really cool that you guys are, one, that you did it, and two, that you guys are both so aligned in doing it. How has it been aligning your goals and motivations together? Has that been very just like natural, or was it kind of like one of you had to get sold on it and teach the other one how and why and all that?
I think before, since he was learning so much about this for probably a good couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
until that point, I wasn't really involved. And then I think you asked me, somehow got me to read The Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't remember how that came about, but it did shift my mind on how I viewed money in general and
Mm-hmm.
not how I was brought up with money. And so I think once we tasted it, we knew that it was a really viable option and we could get really good at what we were doing. And then it just kind of progressed from that.
One of the things that we have too, Joe, is that we really try and stay in our own lanes.
Yeah.
So she's really focused on right now building a real estate brand out here to help buyers and sellers buy Maui properties. Whereas I'm more focused on the investment side of things. And so, taking that back step to putting things in property management, that was kind of hard for us because of that cash flow, letting go of that cash flow, right?
Yeah.
So now our properties, a lot of those properties just break even.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of frustrating too, because, we had been running these things for 8 years or whatever it is. And we know how to run them, how to get the numbers where they need to be. And we're seeing property management like fumbling all over the place. And we want to step in and be like, guys, come on. But at the same time, we want to just be hands off. So it's this delicate balance of, letting go and letting somebody else steer the ship for a little bit.
So how do you justify giving up that much cash flow and the struggle with it? Because it's not like you're not working, especially Caroline. You're
Yeah.
working a lot as a top performing agent in Maui. Is the reason to sacrifice that just to free up your time, Mike, so you can pursue deeper investments that will be more passive, or why justify the rent loss?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it came down to from the beginning, was that we wanted to have time freedom. And so we knew that there's some give and take there. And so when we hired our first employee, that was a virtual assistant, and they can do things 80% as good as we could. But 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. Right.
Yeah.
And so like we want to make sure, like, even if we're getting less pay, we're getting 80% of our returns that we could have. Somebody else is managing the whole thing. I'm not waking up in the middle of the night. I turn my phone off every day at 5 p.m. I
Yeah.
turn my clock off every night. Like I still get up at 4:30 in the morning, but I don't have to. I could sleep until noon if I wanted to, right? That's
Yeah.
what we built. We've built that, right? So handing that off, we still have the income producing properties where it makes sense. And to be fair, like there may be a time that we pull these back from property management.
That's what I was
Right.
gonna say. Is like, and you can always just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you want some more capital, fire
Yeah.
the property manager, run it yourself for a while, pocket some
Totally.
money, and
Yeah.
then put them back in place when you want to just have some more
Yeah.
freedom.
And also it's that was our goal there's never going to be a good time. So might as well rip off the Band-Aid and work on the other things that we want to work on and try it out. So it's kind of where we're at.
Well, I think that idea carries over to so many things in life. It's like if you're so busy on this good thing, you're going to miss out on this great thing.
Yeah.
And it's hard to justify, like you say, because this is good stuff, like it makes sense to spend my time here. But then you're like, yeah, wait, is this the end? Is this all I see for myself? And if you're not satisfied with that, then you gotta pivot, even if it kind of feels like 2 steps back, to get 3 steps forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
not
you
fun to
guys,
go in the rebuilding stage, but it's worthwhile in the long run.
yeah, well, and that's insightful that you guys are able to see that. A lot of people get stuck in that middle stage and never really grow because of that. But you guys have done a lot. You guys have done the short term. You've also done long term, midterm, even development and syndications. Talk about your experience with that, and maybe you could compare them
Sure.
a little bit, what you like and don't like about the differences.
Yeah. So, we are very young in the development game, and that is something that we are doing with partners. In fact, someone your listeners probably know quite well, Brody, is our partner on a deal.
There you go.
And so he is running a lot of the day-to-day operations on the development of that particular product, which is a glamping resort that we're doing out in Virgin, Utah. And
Awesome.
We're super, super excited with that. And we're super... we're learning so much because there is so much that we never would have thought of with development. It's been a year and a half that we've owned the property and we haven't broken ground yet. Wow. There's just so much, right? So that has been a learning process for sure. With syndications, that's a whole lot different because that is completely mailbox money. And, that's something where we have no control. We have no say.
We're
a part of them.
Gotcha. You're like investing in the syndication, not running them. You're not GMing it. You're
right. We're limited partners.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. So with that, it's, we pick an asset class and we pick a sponsor, which is somebody who, runs the syndication, whether it's apartment buildings or mobile home parks or self-storage or whatever. And we decide to invest 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is with that particular sponsor for a set return. And that return may be 7%, 8%, whatever, plus, a payout once the property sells or refinances or whatever it may be. So those returns aren't usually as strong as if we were doing it ourselves. But if we have extra cash that we can put into something like that and let, a legitimate big time operator run it, it's a good way to diversify and get yourself into other asset classes.
Yeah. Well, and talk about passive, right?
Yeah. That's as passive as it gets, right?
That's as passive. Yeah. You just put it there and it is what it is. It's also less in your control. Like you can't control the exit or pull that money if you wanted to, utilize it somewhere else. So you got to, like say, pick and choose where you're putting your money and be aware of that. And that's always what I recommend to people. Like, well, should I do syndications? It's like, are you okay not being able to access that money? Because
syndications are great for the right person, 100%. Right? And those are like, if you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or you got a high paying 7-figure job, you're not going to replace your income with real estate, not very easily anyway. And
not passive real estate for sure.
Right. So for those kinds of people, if you've got a little bit of cash sitting on the side or even in the stock market and you want to diversify that, I think that's a great way to do that. I think syndications are one of the best. We've seen great returns in the stuff that we've put our money into.
Yeah, something I really like about you keep saying like you're diversifying yourself, and that's what I see. It's like, oh, you've got the money in the development stuff with Brody, doing this like glamping resort. Like that's a cool thing to pursue, and who knows how long that'll take and what the returns will be, but higher upside and more potential risk, maybe more unknowns. Then you've got the syndication where it's just like pretty turnkey for you, super passive, don't have any control over an exit or accessing the capital. But then you've got your property, like I said, where you could hire a manager or you could fire a manager and you could refinance or you could pull a HELOC or you could sell it. Like you have all the freedom of, traditional real estate investing. I mean, I call it traditional, that's what I think of, but I think of investing. And it's like, but that's the cool thing is you're dabbling in all of it. And so you kind of get the upside of all of it and the downside of all of it and really does even things out. And it's cool to be able to have that foresight to be able to kind of expand, what you do instead of just doing one thing and kind of missing out on some of the upside of other stuff.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So what do you guys see next then, like what excites you right now about real estate investing? Because I know for me, like after you've done a certain thing for a while, you kind of get like bored of it. It becomes almost turnkey. Something that when you first did was like mind blowing. You couldn't stop talking about it. So excited. And you're like, yeah, bought another little house, bought another little house. Like it's not like as exciting. It's still beneficial and great, and a
Sure.
compounding effect of doing that consistently. But what like kind of makes you nervous or excited, or is like getting your brain reeling to like learn more about?
Well, we have a piece of land, so we do want to do a lifestyle build. And I preface it with that because it will, I call it our money pit, because it's
Yeah.
just going to bleed us of money. And so that's a beautiful thing, but it's also something that's not as priority. But we do want to make it happen. So, building a property, designing, we've gone through architecture plans and surveys, and
Mm,
that's a whole nother ballpark for us
Totally.
because we're learning a lot and spending, 10 to 20K in surveys alone. And so,
yeah.
we're learning a lot about that other than, rehabbing a house or a condo.
I think, Joe, in addition to that, because that is something that we're excited about, is development for sure. There's a lot of things within the real estate world that excite me, and I think that there's a lot of really interesting asset classes that are speaking to me. Like I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about assisted living and senior
Care
care
facilities.
facilities.
Mm,
Like that.
yeah.
I love that space. It's really hard, but there's also big profit to be made in there. And I think, one of the other things, and you know this as well as anyone, is that real estate investing is about networking. And
Yeah.
when you network, when you go to conferences or meetups, or, just listening to podcasts or whatever, connecting with people on Instagram, right? Like those kinds of things sometimes lead to amazing opportunities. And so right now we are open to opportunities, and we're excited about the ones that we've seen come down the road.
That's cool. So are you guys actually looking into doing any of the assisted living stuff? Just kind of an idea right now?
We're in talks. It's a tricky one because we need somebody to manage it. I don't want to manage it. No way.
Right.
But but yes, I would help um, with the finances of it and the systems of it and get it up and running. My thing is, Joe, I like the building of brands and the building of assets and adding that value. But once it's stabilized, it doesn't excite me anymore. And I want to hand it off and move on to the next. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does, that's I think you see that in a lot of like kind of these visionary people, like they just have this dream they want to go do, they want to build, and then it's funny because some people are like, I want it just stabilized and like enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like that isn't that the whole purpose?
Yeah.
But you have a different itch.
I want someone else to run the stabilized product.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's what's cool about it. And whether it's having a long-term property manager or short-term property manager, someone running assisted living, like you need to have somebody to manage whatever asset class it is. And so
Mhm.
it's like once you start to see it all as one, you're like, oh, well, it could be this or it could be that. Like it doesn't, and you don't have to limit yourself to just one type, there's so many options out there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you guys have done quite a bit of stuff. You say your strategy would be buying cash flowing assets in appreciating markets, and move from active investment into passive and invest in lifestyle. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that last part, is investing in lifestyle. And you mentioned a little bit, Caroline, like a lifestyle purchase. Um, tell me how that can be an investment and not just an expense or a liability. Is
Yeah.
buying a home an investment if you're going to live in it? Tell me about the money pit and how you guys view it all and in the long term picture, as lifestyle investing.
Yeah, I mean, on paper and the analyzer calendar, it wouldn't pencil. But for us, like the mental, the type of lifestyle that we want to build, we can see that as a place that would provide that and check those boxes. So is it something that we need to move on right now? No. but it's also something that we can see, like, we never take money out of the business. We always reinvest, and we're always purchasing something else. And at one point it was minimum every 6 months. And so right now it's kind of like, it's nice to be able to enjoy some of those benefits, reap the rewards of those years of hard work. And this property could really fit those bills.
So I think to tag on to that, when we talk about lifestyle investing, one of the things we look for is in a property, obviously location is our most important thing, right? That's the old adage in real estate: location, location, location. But for us, when we look at location, we ask ourselves, would we move into it? Right. So is it a location that we want to live in? And then is the asset something that we would move into? So when I told you about the house that we bought sight unseen in 2020, that is a house in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, we had never been to Phoenix, Arizona, but what we decided was, okay, look, properties rent for a lot of money in Phoenix and they don't cost a lot of money. So if we were going to move to Phoenix, where would we want to live? So we did some research, right? So all we knew about Phoenix was that it's hot, it's a desert. So do they have water in the desert? Oh, well, look, there's all these little lakefront communities that are like man-made lakes. Oh, that's cool. I'd want to be on a lake. Okay, well, I'd also want something safe for my family. All right, let's find some gated communities. Okay, there's a few of these with gated communities. And then we kind of dove further and we kind of got a feel of like, well, these are kind of white collar areas. These are kind of more the blue collar areas. Well, okay, I'd want to be in a white collar area. So we found a house in a gated community that sits on a lake with a boat dock in the backyard. Bought it sight unseen. And that house produces almost $3,500 a month in cash flow for us today. Now, we've been out there. That house is incredible. We've got a ton of value in it. We've done a little bit of rehab to it. It's probably one of our best producing assets. So when we talk about lifestyle play, I don't want to live in Arizona, but if I did, that is where I would want to live, right? So, I know a lot of the people in real estate investing school are from Utah. I love St. George. Where do I love in St. George? I love Ivins. Okay, so now I want a house in Ivins with a view of the Red Mountain, right? So these are things that I look at. We're talking about our development project. Well, that house is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And if you've been up to Coeur d'Alene, it's a beautiful place. But what do I want? Well, I want something on the lake or lake view. I want pine trees or, whatever. That's what we got. We got acreage on the lake. So, we're looking at lifestyle as a
buy box, but also exit strategy, because if we were to just purchase properties that are 50 to 150K, most likely worst case scenario, we wouldn't want to move into them. And we wouldn't really be able to sell them for much more, if that. And so these are also just different ways to, when we're analyzing what are our worst case scenario exit strategies, or do we have to move into it? Would we want to move into it? So not for everyone, but that's been our kind of.
So the way that we look at that too is like, look, if this is something that is exciting to us, it's probably going to be exciting to somebody else too. Right. And so that's where appreciation comes into play. And those types of properties tend to appreciate a little bit better than something maybe in the Midwest, right? And I'm not going to knock anything in the Midwest, because cash flow is certainly important too, and you get a lot of that out there. But it's just not the strategy that we've followed. We followed more of the appreciating markets and the locations within those appreciating markets.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. Like, one, I think it's so interesting when you buy something that has like almost like intrinsic value because it's limited, right? Like, it's on the beach, it's on the lake, it's scarce. A cheap home in the plains of Nebraska, it's like they could just go down the street and build another one. It's the same thing, right? But they can't. There's only so much lakefront. There's only so much of the good stuff that's approachable, which drives that appreciation. Which is cool. So when you can find something that's unique and has that specialty to it, which are usually the more desirable stuff, like, see, you're going to have, even if you might not have as many buyers, you get the right buyers and they'll pay whatever, because that's what they actually want. When you get in that like higher end luxury stuff, and even if you get real extreme, if you get real big, it's like, crazy expensive, like the right person doesn't care how much it costs. You know what I mean? But saying all that, how do you make the numbers work? Because I think that's what most people want when they get into real estate. I want to own everything you just described, the coolest thing, the
Sure.
nicest thing, the stuff I'd want. And
Yep.
then what a lot of people find is, oh, there's no way to make money on that.
Right.
And I can't hold my breath for 10 years until it goes up in value. So I'm
That's
going to
right.
go buy the duplex in the Midwest so I can
Totally.
actually have it pay for itself and be self-sustaining and not drain me every month, but actually add to me. How did
Correct.
you guys find it where you're cash flowing thousands of dollars and you got the A-class asset you would love to be in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so the answer is kind of three-pronged, right? So one is time, and time solves all problems with real estate. The longer you hold on to something, the more valuable it tends to get, especially if you're in an appreciating market. And
Sure.
if that's the case, rents tend to go up too. So now your cash flow goes up. Two is equity. Our properties, we're not using the Pace Morby strategy. We're not buying with $0 down. We put a lot of equity down into our properties. We're pretty risk adverse. So we own properties with a little bit of debt and a lot of equity a lot of time. And that's not easy to do, but that's something that we've been able to build up to. And so we could grow much, much faster if we decided to just kind of try and leverage everything. But instead, like, we'll have properties that have 50% debt. And because of that, that's when it cash flows. Like, I
Right.
mentioned that I'm looking in Ivans. Well, cool. Ivans is great. I would love something to cash flow there, but rents are terrible in
Yeah,
Ivans,
they're
and
so
the
bad.
properties are expensive in Ivans.
Very.
So I would have to put down at least 50% to break even. Now, would I do that? Maybe, if it fits in with our investment strategy at the time, but that may be like a newer property that we plan on holding for 10, 15 years. And over that amount of time, the rents are going to go up to a point where it's going to make sense. And the value of the property will go up too. Right. So it's just a different type of strategy. It's one that we don't have a ton of leverage because we keep a lot of equity in our properties.
And we're not trying to race to have as many doors because we are buying more expensive assets.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So two thoughts on that. One, you probably couldn't have done this when you started. I'm
Right.
assuming you've
Right.
built up to this. And then two, like, yeah, how do you fund these? It's like, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to put, half down on these beautiful homes. And, you, like I say, it sounds like you've built up to that is kind of like probably how
Yeah.
you funded it. But
Yeah.
maybe just kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So,
We can give an example of our very first short-term rental
sure.
that may have either continued us on the path or stopped us on our path
Sure.
with real estate. And coming full circle with that one, we just recently sold that and we 1031'd it. It had gone up in
Let's give some exact numbers on that.
Yeah, you run the crunch numbers.
We bought a short-term rental, a single, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo out here in Maui, Hawaii. This was our first short-term rental property. We did a cash out refi on our house, and we bought that property in cash. Now, we paid $500,000 or something like that for the property.
Yeah.
Okay. And
this was what year?
2018. Okay. So we had already built an ohana, an ADU onto our house here. And so we were getting cash flow from that. So we were saving some of that cash. We sold out of some stocks and other investments that we had. We had been pretty frugal up until this point, but we put all our eggs into that short-term rental, and we bought it in cash because we weren't able to get a loan on it. So that was $540,000. Now, we just sold that property. We put about another 45 into it. So let's say we're all in 575 or somewhere in that range. We just recently sold that property for $1.365 million. Now, that's a pretty good return. And that's not a return that is typical in Midwest markets, but it is typical. Not typical. It's not typical anywhere. But in an area like this, where you
But
kind of
it's
have,
possible in
but
areas
it's
like it's not even possible
possible.
if you go buy a $50,000 house, it
Correct.
will never be worth 1.3
Correct.
million, you know?
Right. And so we were seeing great returns on that as a short-term rental, but we also saw the writing on the wall when it comes to insurance and property taxes and all that stuff kind of coming up. We're seeing a compression in returns. So we decided to sell out of that property. We actually did a reverse 1031 exchange on that, where we bought a property, another one in Arizona, another one in a gated community, another one on a lake. This is a custom home that was built in like 1991 or something like that, or 93. I don't know. But it was a beautiful house, very dated. So we took that, we took $1 million. We bought this house for $1 million. And then we spent another $400,000 renovating this house. And it is cherry, but we paid for that in cash from the sale of this property. Now, our intention is to hold it in cash until, and it's being short-term rented right now.
This
And
is the Arizona property, right?
this is another Arizona property. So we have one as a midterm, we have this one as a short-term,
Gotcha.
and it's in property management. And it's probably valued at about 1.6 maybe. So we don't have a ton of forced equity into it because we spent so much on it. But it's a pretty amazing property. But I
Well, and
thought
the
with
funny thing is, I don't mean to interrupt you. Say, oh, we don't have a ton relative, but you've got like
relative,
200,000
yeah,
or something like
200,000.
that. You know,
But
it's like
relative to
ratio-wise isn't
putting
a
in,
ton, but in reality, like that's hundreds of thousands of
yeah,
dollars. And that's what's cool about
correct.
playing this big is
Yep,
that little bit of an increase or a little bit of equity
yep,
is a lot, you know,
correct.
in reality, which is so cool.
That is true. That is true. So our thought with that was we hold this, let it cash flow, kind of get a year's worth of data on it, and then see what makes sense. Like, can we refinance and pull out 50%? Will it still cash flow if we do that? And then we put that into our Coeur d'Alene build or
Mm.
something else, right? So we're just moving money around to other assets or the Ivan's house, right? Like whatever it may be, we can do that with. Or if interest rates come down, okay, now it's time, let's refinance out a whole bunch more because it makes more sense. So, it's really like the velocity of money and where does it work best for us with regards to our risk portfolio.
Well, that's the interesting thing. You found a balance between, like, say, the velocity of it, like keeping it rolling, but also being as safe as you want to be. Having that
Yeah.
ratio that you feel comfortable with. You know, some people it's 100%, some people it's 90, some people it's 50, some people it's zero. You know, my dad's old school. He just literally works for 20 years, pays a house off, buys it. Works for 20 years, buys a house in cash. You know, that's a
Yeah,
long way to only end up with a couple properties, but that's what he's comfortable with. You know, and so it's
sure.
like you got to look at your goals and the one thing I think that's really plays your guys' advantage is you're not afraid to play big. You know what I mean? A multiple six-figure rehab is no joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you feel confident enough in your numbers and in your valuations and your strategy to throw, $1 million cash and 400,000? These are big
Totally.
numbers for most
Great
people.
question.
Um, but it does. I mean, assume you feel pretty confident in doing it. You're not just doing
Part
it
of that,
blindly,
yeah,
willy-nilly.
part of that, we're probably jaded because we're in an expensive market. So when we see homes for 500K or 800K, we're like, wow, it has a backyard. What a deal.
Yeah.
So I think we are used to seeing different numbers. And then also, of course, with the knowledge of neighborhood and data that we've gathered or researched that he's done on a market, those just kind of go hand in hand and the numbers don't scare us. They're just metrics.
So yeah, and that is
Love
a,
that.
a good point. Like the house that we're sitting in right now is probably valued at 1.5 million. And that sounds like a lot of money, but this is an affordable housing community that we live in Maui, right?
Yeah.
So like it's just a different perspective. There's nothing under $1 million on this island. And so when we see a $1 million house in Arizona, that's 10 times the house that we're sitting in right now. We're like, wow, what a deal. But to get to your point on that, Joe, is like I'm very much in tune with different markets, a handful of them. And I really try and focus in on if something hits that buy box. So there are two areas of Arizona that I buy in, two communities, right? And all in, there's probably 300, 400 homes that match the criteria that I would want in those markets. And, we don't know because there's no data for these things. So is it going to make sense? Is it going to cash flow? I don't really know. Is it worth putting $400,000 in? I don't really know because
I'll let you know.
we don't have the numbers. We have the numbers from the first one that we bought, and we have great cash flow on that. We have a 3% loan on that one. And that one we are pretty leveraged on. But the returns are incredible. So, we didn't know if we would catch lightning in a bottle twice or not. But it was worth a shot. Right. And so why not play a little bit bigger? So this house is a little bit nicer, a lot of bit nicer, actually, in a great community. And if it didn't work out, well, we can always pivot. We can sell it. We can long-term rent it. Like when you're playing with house money, which is kind of like the house, we own it in cash. Right. So like $100 a month is cash flowing to us. Like we're not renting it for $100 a month, but you know what I mean, right? Like if we're getting $7,000 to $10,000 a month, and our holding costs are on that house, I think around 2,000, that's a pretty good return. So we can play around, and if we're not getting 7,000 to 10,000 and we're getting 5,000, that's still cash flow. Right.
Yeah,
and so
you're not like going under,
We're not going under with it. So we can, we've gotten to the point where we can try some things. And, I read an interesting article maybe about a year ago about properties that are more expensive, more of the luxury market properties. So this is a couple of years old, so take it with a grain of salt. And I don't know if it's true or if it's just true in certain markets. I think the market that this was relating to was Las Vegas. But the article researched homes that were sold on Redfin that were over $1 million. And of those, and then it compared them to homes that were less than $1 million. And of the homes that sold, the ones that sold for over $1 million appreciated over the previous 5 years at a much higher rate than homes that were less than $1 million. So I don't know if there's anything to that or not, but there may also be benefit in investing in luxury markets to some degree.
That's interesting, because you think like, oh, if $100,000 home goes up 20%, like it's 120,000. $1 million one goes up, 1.2 million. But if it's even going up more at an accelerated pace compared, and I'm sure it's, like you said, market specific.
For sure.
But I think there's a lot of power in the bigger stuff, and that's what I think is cool about what you guys have done. And one thing that I was thinking, like you're talking about, if you're wrong, right? You're like, oh, I don't know what this is going to cash flow. What if some of these numbers are wrong? What you're not wrong about, though, is for sure you have a quality asset, a beautiful home in a unique spot. Like, there's so much value in it that if your numbers or assumptions are off, you're not dead in the water because you still are going to be winning because you own something amazing. If you go buy a $2 million value add multi-unit in, the butthole of Midwest somewhere, that could be a huge moneymaker, cash flow king. But what if it's not? What if you're wrong? And then you're stuck with a lemon that no one wants to touch. And that's the difference. Whatever happens, you're not stuck with a lemon. You're stuck with something amazing. Even if the cash return isn't gold, and even if the numbers aren't as lucrative as you would like, and it could have been easier to put in the, market or whatever, you still have something dope, and that, and that's kind of your safety net, it seems like.
Yeah, that's kind of been our secret sauce, is like just asking ourselves, would we move into it?
I love that.
What would it look like if we did move into it? So, we rent our places furnished, and if they're vacant for a week or something, or 2 weeks or a month, well, why don't we go move into it for a week or a month? Because it's a pretty awesome property.
That's really cool. Guys, I love this. We could talk about this forever. I do want to get to some of our final four questions and get some of your thoughts there. But if people want to follow you, and see what you guys are doing as a family, you've got some really good branding, like Our Family Invests. I love that. It's not just, I don't know, it's kind of special. I love seeing you, and I've met, your whole family and your kid, and it's cool what you guys do. But what do people do to be able to follow you and tag along like I get to?
Sure. Our Family Invest is something that we kind of started working on last year. And that's, the point of last year, our big goal was to get everything to passive. And so when we got everything to passive, we realized that we want to be more like Joe Jensen. How do we get to be more like Joe Jensen? So we started a podcast and it's brand new. We haven't even released anything yet, but we've interviewed maybe 8 to 10 people. And it's based on us as a couple interviewing other entrepreneurial couples that we find successful, but also who keep family centered in their lives. And so our Family Invests on Instagram is probably the best. And then Caroline as a realtor.
Yeah. So at Lady Aloha REI.
Yep. So yeah.
I love it, you guys. Yeah. I we talked about me being on the podcast, and you told me I need to go get a girlfriend at least,
or
married,
wife Joe.
Or something. So,
Can't wait.
maybe someday I'll get there. But I like that your niche is in interviewing couples. That's fun, and it is different, and everybody has their own pros and cons of investing together with a partner, especially an intimate partner like that, So I'm excited for the release of your guys' show and to hear the discussions you guys are having with other power couples like yourselves. So that's super cool.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
All right. You guys can answer these questions as a team, or you can each have your own individual answer for one or all of them, whatever you guys want to do. So if you could send out a text message to the world, everybody's going to get their phone blown up from you guys. What's that text message going to say?
You want to go first?
No, I want you to answer it.
Pressure is on. That's a good question. I think it would be something inspiring. It would probably be a lyric to some Michael Franti song or something like that.
Okay.
It's a good day for a good day, or, whatever it may be. Life is better together, or, something like that.
Yeah.
I like that. You want to add on to that, Caroline? Is that good?
Yeah, I mean, we often refer to life is better with you, just like that acknowledgement of the people in your life. You never know what people are going through. And that is kind of one of those premises with Our Family Invests, is like invest in your growth, not only in your bank account. And so that's I think that would be aligned with that message.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you. I think that would be a good text. I'm grateful for you.
I would like to get that text from you, Mike. That'd be great.
I'm gonna text you right after.
I love it. All right. So question number 2, what's one of the most expensive or interesting mistakes that you've made in real estate investing?
Probably the Coeur d'Alene piece of land.
That's not a mistake.
That's not a mistake.
221 probably.
Oh,
we bought a condo. Yeah. We bought this condo. It had a ton of potential. Short-term rental on the beach on Maui. We bought it from an estate sale, and it was tenant occupied for like 30 years. And so we didn't really know what was in and what wasn't. And so when we opened the doors and got this guy out and then started opening up walls, we realized real quickly that this place was put together with duct tape and super glue.
And 2 people passed, the beneficiaries, during our process.
So it turned out to be like
passed away, like the beneficiaries. So like someone dies, leaving it in an estate, and then the beneficiaries of the person that passed, they pass away as well.
Yes.
It was a long closing. But what we ended up getting it, we opened up the walls, and it had like this chiller system in there for the AC. And it was one of these units where it's pretty rare, but it was it had central AC throughout the entire building. And so each unit had its own little chiller box or something. I don't even know what it is. But it was so old that you couldn't get parts for it or anything like that. And it, of course, didn't work. So in order to replace it, we had to get a whole new system fabricated out of Florida, shipped over to
Oh,
Maui.
I think I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember we would do these conference calls and you were
Yeah.
like working on this place and trying to figure out this
Man.
AC situation. I
Trigger
remember
mental,
that.
they're not passive.
Yeah. So, we ended up figuring out a way to make this thing work, and we got it to the point where it turned out to be a beautiful unit. But we knew right away after opening up the walls that the quality was not there behind the walls. And we knew that there were going to be issues down the road with it. So our intention changed from long-term hold to 1031 as soon as possible. And so we decided to put it into short-term rental, and we did that. We made a little bit of cash flow on it, and then we ended up 1031ing this on the day of the Maui fires. Actually,
Yeah.
we closed on this thing.
Oh my gosh.
So we
So
closed
we didn't
out
know
of
if it was closing.
and we ended up 1031ing that into the deal with Brody. So hopefully this will all work out well. This is not the worst, biggest failure. Hopefully that's up to Brody, I suppose. But I think this could be, actually one of the best investments for us in the long run. It'll go from a potential failure to a potential huge win.
So did you sell it for more than you bought it for? Was there like
Yeah,
actual
we
profit there at
we
the end of the
made
day?
profit in it. At the end of the day, we did make profit in it because we added so much value to it. Right.
Yeah.
It was, and we bought it right. So we bought it well under market value. It was off market.
Did a full gut.
Did a full gut job. I did most of the handyman work myself in the renovations, and then we sold it at the right time too. So we did. I think we made about 200,000 off of it. But
Nice loss, guys.
Yeah,
our biggest mistake was making 200,000 on this flip. Well, it was a surprising headache.
There's a lot in the process.
We remember the journey on that one, and it was a headache.
It was a headache for sure. But honestly, a project like that was, it'll look back, it'll look really well, but we put a lot of money into this thing too, and we had a failed 1031 exchange, because for a lot of different reasons. So we'll have to pay, we had to pay taxes on that. And so we didn't end up clearing 200,000 off of that at the end of the day. It was much, much, much less than that. And now we've got, the holding costs with the development and all that goes into that. So at this point, we've lost money on it, but in the long run,
Sure.
I think we'll be just fine.
Well, and that's what's so interesting about this question. I ask everybody that question. I've gotten lots of answers, and it surprised me how often the answer is like, oh, this whole story like you did, all these headaches and surprises and nightmares and deaths and money and then I'm like, and at the end of the day, they made money. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's so cool with real estate. Like the loss at the end of the day, it's like,
still a win.
you still, and especially if you find a way to hold on long term, like say you're like, oh, the Idaho one's really expensive, Caroline, you're like, man, that Idaho one's costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the game's not over, right? It's like we're just getting going on that, baby. And so it's like it's cool that it's like if you can hold on long enough, almost everything's a win. The only real losses I've seen are people, the answer is like they got screwed by a contractor. Which, if you look at the big picture, I bet they still made money even with the loss of that contractor on the deal. If you look at the big picture, or the only ones I've seen real loss was a bad timed flip that went way over budget.
Sure.
So other than that, it's like the losses end up being wins, which is so cool. You know what I mean? And the education, and then it leads to this next thing, this network. Like I had a deal that was kind of crappy, but then it led me to meet this guy, and then he gave me a better deal. It was actually really, really good. So if I combine those, the numbers are actually great, and it's like, it's so interesting. And that's one thing I love about real estate investing.
Heck yeah.
So, okay. Last question then. What is a one word or short phrase to encapsulate why you love real estate investing so much?
I would say our word of the year, elevate.
Yeah. It's just opened so many doors, and I guess no pun intended, right? Like we have met so many amazing people through this journey. And I know that there's so many amazing people that we still have yet to meet. And yeah, I think elevate is a good word to put into it. That's what it does for us. It helps us to elevate.
I love it, you guys. Yeah, I mean, that's how we've connected, and I've enjoyed, our friendship over the years and seeing your journey. And it's real estate, really does open so many doors in so many ways.
Yeah.
And it can elevate your life. I love that. That's beautiful, you guys. Thank you so much for carving out the time
Yeah.
when you could be out
Thanks,
at the
Joe.
beach in the sun. And you're sitting here talking to me, so I appreciate it.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having
Joe.
us.
Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. This is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to think bigger.